Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Welcome to today's program of the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm Gloria Duffy, President and CEO of the club, and so pleased to host this very special program honoring the mental and behavioral health team at the University of California, San Francisco for their leadership. Today's special program is part of the Commonwealth Club series recognizing recipients of our Distinguished Citizen Award. Our honorees today are truly distinguished citizens, committed to the improvement of mental health care in the Bay Area and the nation. We also thank our generous gala supporters who made gifts to the club specifically in honor of today's distinguished citizens. They are the Bernard Osher Foundation, Greg Dalton and Lucia Choi, and our board member Mark Zitter and his wife, Dr. Jessica Zitter. Today's program will honor the work of the UCSF Behavioral Health Team for its innovation in mental health. We salute UCSF Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences Department Chair, Dr. Matthew State, Neurological Surgery Chair, Dr. Edward Chang, Dr. Lisa Fortuna, Chief of Psychiatry and Vice Chair at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, and UCSF Health Executive Council member, John Pritzker. Announced just this week, the UCSF Nancy Friend Pritzker Psychiatry Building will be the new home for UC San Francisco's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. Scheduled to open in the fall, the building is the culmination of a long-standing vision to integrate physical and mental health at UCSF. The new building is supported by a gift of nearly $60 million from John Pritzker and Lisa Stone Pritzker. And it's named in honor of John's sister, Nancy Friend Pritzker, who died by suicide at age 24 during a depressive episode in 1972. The facility is designed to optimize patient care, drive collaborative research across disciplines and disorders, and destigmatize mental health care through thoughtful design. Dr. Edward Chang and Dr. Lisa Fortuna will be joining us later in the program. So now it's my pleasure to further introduce Mr. Pritzker, Dr. State, and today's distinguished moderator, Michael Krasny. John Pritzker is chairman of the John Pritzker Family Fund, and he's well known for his commitment to mental health, serving on the Executive Council of UCSF Health and supporting the Commonwealth Club Speaker Series on mental health, dedicated in memory of his sister, Nancy Friend Pritzker. Mr. Pritzker is also a significant supporter of UCSF's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, in particular the department's research, faculty, clinical care, and training. He's passionate about reducing stigma and ensuring the availability and accessibility of mental health care. His charitable work on this issue has been aimed at supporting efforts to reduce mental health stigma at the individual, community, and systems levels. Being honored along with Mr. Pritzker is Dr. Matthew State, MD and PhD. He is the Oberndorf Family Distinguished Professor of Psychiatry. He's also the director of the Langley Porter Psychiatric Institute, president of Langley Porter Psychiatric Hospital and Clinics, executive director of the UCSF Child, Teen, and Family Center, and chair of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at UCSF. As head of the UCSF Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, Dr. State leads a diverse and talented team of professionals dedicated to advancing mental health across the lifespan through comprehensive and compassionate patient care, through pioneering research, excellence in training the next generation of mental health leaders, and active engagement in the community. Under his leadership, the department has focused on breaking down the historical barriers between mental and physical health, advancing integrated care, research, and education across the clinical neurosciences, promoting the development of a highly diverse mental health workforce, prioritizing innovative programs, caring directly for the Bay Area's most underserved populations, and combating the stigma associated with mental illness. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with Dr. State for over 35 years, and he is a man of many talents across several disciplines, as well as a wonderful human being. We have a wonderful moderator this evening, Michael Krasny, distinguished host of KQED's Forum program for 28 years before retiring this past February. Michael has also remained professor of English at San Francisco State University. Before Michael begins the conversation, let me once again congratulate Mr. Pritzker and Dr. State and the entire UCSF mental health team who share in these awards. Gentlemen, would you please let everyone see your awards? Thank you, and once again, congratulations to you.
Thanks, Gloria.
Thank you,
Michael,
Gloria.
Of course. Michael, I'm very pleased to turn the program over to you. Thank you.
And thank you, Gloria. It's good to be here. And let me also echo what Gloria said with warm congratulations to both of you and to UC and to all who have been involved in this remarkable work that you've been doing, which I want people to find out more about. And I thought, John Pritzker, I'd begin with you and not only congratulate you, but also sort of thank you as a serious citizen of the Bay Area for the donation and the support that you've given. I want to talk about the new building and find out all about it. But first, let's talk about your passion and what got you involved in this. It's personal in many ways, as Dr. Duffy kind of indicated, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And thank you for coming out of retirement to talk to all of us. I had a sister, Nancy, who died by suicide in 1972. And it took years to process what had happened to Nancy, to our family. And one of the conclusions I came to, 72, as Matt will tell you, was the Neolithic age of psychiatry. There were no medications per se, and you just didn't talk about it. And that held true for my family as well. And I realized that so many people could get treated for what is a very common situation. Depression affects so many people, but people tend not to want to broach the subject. Somebody once said to me, the kidneys, the liver, the heart, they're all organs, and the brain is an organ, and you wouldn't hesitate to talk about any of the others, but people just don't want to talk about suffering with mental illness. And so Nancy, we didn't talk as a family about Nancy for years and years. And literally one night I was with my younger sister, and we had never broached the subject, and we spent 4 or 5 hours talking about Nancy. And I realized it wasn't dangerous, it wasn't awful, it was quite a relief. And from that sprang this notion of how do we work on stigma, the stigma of mental health. So that was kind of where it all came from, Michael.
Well, that ties in with the new building. And in fact, let me go to Dr. State on this. So much of the new building has been tied, not only what we just heard from John Pritzker, but to the idea of diminishing the stigmatization of mental health. Talk about what your vision is in terms of how that's going to be implemented and how it's going to really make a difference.
Great. Thanks for the question. I think we thought about it in a variety of different ways. At one level, we felt that having a building that was patient-centered, that allowed people to come and receive their care there, and particularly families who have children who may be suffering from a psychiatric illness, but also have medical conditions, that having one place where medical care and psychiatric care could be integrated under one roof would be helpful, and would begin to send a signal that that those things are on equal footing. As John said, that there's no difference seeing your doctor in one room for your regular pediatric checkup, or an adolescent with an eating disorder seeing their doctor and their nutritionist to make sure that their heart is fine and everything is functioning okay, and then to be able to go next door and receive psychiatric and psychological care. So that integration of mental and physical health we thought was really important. We also really, in thinking about the design of the building, wanted to send a message about how UCSF feels about patients who are seeking medical care. If you go around the country and look at many academic medical centers, when, if you have a child who, unfortunately has a serious illness, often they're going really to gleaming monuments of modern medical science. Just a block away from the new Nancy Friend Pritzker building is the Benioff Children's Hospital. But often when you're seeking care for psychiatric illness in those settings, it's you're going off campus, maybe to a converted office building, often to places that look like, they might have been designed as a medium security or low security prison. And so we really wanted to send a message in the design of the building that that you would come to a place that is hopeful, that's light filled, that's easy to navigate, and that really indicates that UCSF is making a significant commitment to an investment in taking care of patients, regardless of whether or not their primary complaint is physical or mental health. So we hope that in that way and in others, that the building will really stand as kind of a symbol against stigma, against the separation of mental health care from physical health care.
Yeah, it's striking how integrative the vision is. And I assume you're also talking about treatment in all different phases of life and families as well as individuals, and maybe some research there as well. What's the status of the building? Where it's in terms of construction and opening?
We're shooting for a first patient by the end of October. And very hopeful that with some of the challenges around the pandemic that date won't slip. So I got my fingers crossed. Thanks for making that comment. I think we're focused on particularly the patient-centered notion of care and the way that plays for stigma or plays a role in addressing stigma. But the building is really designed, as you said, is really to be integrative across multiple dimensions. So the building has extensive resources for clinical research, dramatic expansion of our space for training and education of medical students through residents and postdoctoral fellows, as well as the clinical services, and really brings together many disciplines from neurology and neurosurgery, radiology, anesthesiology, even OBGYN. We have a program in the building for expectant mothers looking at ways to use psychosocial intervention to decrease preterm birth. So it really is very much an integrative vision, which we also hope will begin to lead to really an acceptance of mental health being part of the entire experience and not something that's marginalized and stigmatized.
So I think, John Pritzker, it's safe to say we're talking about tremendous enhancement potentials as far as accessibility and availability for mental health patients.
Yeah, one of the ideas. So we bought this building. It was a Copenhagen warehouse outlet at 3rd and 18th. And I had a number of friends that said it was the dumbest thing I had done. And then a few weeks later, they announced Benioff Hospital, and poof, I was a visionary. But it was strategic. We picked that location because it's really the hub of public transportation and UCSF transportation, literally right there. And the notion was, with UCSF's focus on community care, it would make it accessible to everybody in every neighborhood. And that's really how we ended up in that location.
Could you say a little something, John, about, I know your foundation is involved in a lot of other things related to mental health, and that's all kind of tied into the vision here. Talk about that. Yeah,
so as an example, one of the things we're supporting is the development of India Basin Waterfront Park. It's a place to congregate, to play in Bayview Hunters Point. And I think of it, I don't know if I get in hot water for it, but I think of it as a new Crissy Field for that part of town. And we think, and especially given the impact of the pandemic, we see now the impact of community and open spaces and how important they are to mental health. And so that's a big part of our foundation's work. The work we're doing with Commonwealth Club, the speaker series around mental health, So those are some of the things, Michael, that we've been focusing on.
Oh, thank you, John. I want to go back to Dr. State and kind of piggyback on something you just said, which is I'd like to hear from you, Dr. State, about what your department's had to do in terms of adjustments with all the exacerbation under the pandemic of mental health problems that are the result of the pandemic and that are tied to it.
Yeah, it's been quite a year. We had a very rapid transformation. I have to say, for people who aren't aware, UCSF Psychiatry, we are the mental health service for UCSF Health and UCSF campus. We also run the psychiatric services at ZSFG and at the San Francisco VA, and a number of community-based programs spread across the city from the Mission District to Upper Market. And so there were multiple challenges in multiple different domains kind of all hitting us at once and for very different populations. So at UCSF proper, we went from literally 3% telehealth services to 99% in a week. So there's this just profound transformation. Our inpatient services remained open, but essentially all of our outpatient care moved to remote very quickly, which was, some programs that really people had never really conceptualized how you would run that in a remote way. Our staff and faculty and trainees were just incredibly resourceful and innovative in making that transition. That went relatively smoothly, in part because of the kind of infrastructure that many of the patients who come to UCSF have in their lives around things like being able to engage in telehealth. But it was a totally different situation down on 6th and Mission at Citywide Focus, which is our Citywide Case Management, which is one of our community-based programs. So the largest provider of intensive case management for severely mentally ill. And there, almost all of our patients are either houseless or housing insecure. So there we were able to get investment from philanthropy and from the university to hand out to that program and some of our other programs serving marginalized patients who are substance users, about 700 cell phones to be able to keep people in touch and be able to avail themselves of telehealth services. And at the height of the pandemic, we were serving about 10,000 meals to our patients, in addition to transforming our services to provide on-site care in some of the COVID hotels, going to where our patients were in order to be able to provide those services. As you go around all of our different spaces, it was really a remarkably challenging year. And I just have to say, sort of simultaneously, one of the most challenging and awful years, but also as chair of the department here, one of the most gratifying to see how our providers stepped up, not only to provide services to our patients, but we also stood up multiple services that we'd never had before for frontline healthcare workers and employees at UCSF. So it's really been a remarkable effort. And I take the opportunity to thank everyone in the department who has just done really unbelievable work over the course of this year to respond.
Well, kudos to you and all who were involved in this. I mean, it's staggering and monumental what you were facing during the pandemic. I'm just wondering if you could say something about what you see or envision in terms of the future, particularly in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. How and in what ways can you go on serving the public, or do you want to serve the citizenry in the fashion that you kind of outlined for us here?
Yeah. So again, sort of one of the very unexpected things was this transformation in the way that we thought about providing psychiatric care. I have to say that, one of the challenges that we've already started to face and now fully expect has been a tremendous increase in demand. So while many other services, you read about hospitals that, apart from the emergency room and the ICUs, hospitals, services had a dramatically decreased census and volumes. Psychiatry has been exactly the opposite. I mean, we're up 30-40% overall. Some of our services for child and adolescent psychiatric care are up more than 100%. Again, with no increases in the number of clinicians that we have, and we expect, in looking at all the data that's coming through about the response to the pandemic, that this is just the beginning of a new and different kind of wave. and surge around demand for mental health care. So we do think that we're going to need to continue to innovate, that we're going to need to continue to rely on some of these things that emerged over the course of the last year that for a variety of reasons we weren't able to do before. So for instance, part of the reason that we provided such a limited amount of telehealth is that there was no reimbursement for that kind of approach. Now that there is, and we hope that that's going to continue, it really opens up an opportunity for us to extend our care in a way that we couldn't even really conceive of prior to. And so it's going to be a very interesting year for us. We're already wrestling with this question of how do we balance in-person care. We still believe that human contact, that sense of community, even on a one-to-one basis or with group psychotherapy, et cetera, is tremendously important. But at the same time, we know that there are things that the pandemic has now taught us about being able to extend care that may begin to allow us to address what is really already prior to the pandemic, almost an insatiable, demand for mental health services that is only likely to increase.
So let me go back to you, John Pritzker, and outline for us as best you can what your highest hopes are. I mean, we're hearing certainly a kind of vision coming from Dr. State, and you're on the executive board, and you're, the real reason that this building is going up, and you deserve great credit for that. Tell us about your vision.
You just heard from my early vision. We had an early run at getting this project done, and we were hoping to attract Matt from Yale. Didn't work out the first time. Second time was a charm. And I have to say that one of the things that attracts me to UCSF is the leadership. You can have all sorts of plans, but if you don't have the leadership to execute, it's all for naught. And with Sam Hawgood and Matt's leadership, I couldn't be more thrilled. I think it's exactly, from the building standpoint, it's light filled, it's beautiful, it's filled with art. And more than just filled with art, it's thoughtful art. Matt put together a committee of clinicians to vet each piece to make sure it was appropriate to the building and to the people in the building. Every aspect of the building was very well thought through. Nothing was done by happenstance. And so, as Matt just outlined, the integration of research, physical health with mental health, I couldn't be more tickled. The building, if you've ever been by Langley Porter, there couldn't be a more stark contrast. There's going to be a roof garden. There's a coffee shop. You walk in and it's a 5-story sunlit atrium full of hope and optimism. Somebody, when they heard about what we were doing with the arts, said, "Are you going to conduct tours?" And I suspect there hasn't been a building dedicated to psychiatry where anybody ever asked if they could have a tour of the building.
Well, I got to give a little kudos to my friend Sam Berendis, who was head of Langley Porter for a while, because he was in charge of bringing a lot of art in there. And I think
that's right.
There were some very good decisions there, but it may pale in comparison to what you conceived here in this new building.
Well, every now and then you get lucky, and we were able to attract Richard Misrach, who is a great, great Bay Area photographer. And we'll have art by Richard is providing large format photographs, and we're doing a community-based art program with kids that's going to be just great and really exciting. So I couldn't, it's funny, I've been excited about the building for a long, long time, but sitting here listening to all this, I'm trying not to bounce up and down in my chair. This is really a dream come true.
You might resemble Tom Cruise if you did that, I think. You wouldn't want to do that, I don't think.
I think he was talking about psychiatric medications, too.
He was talking about Katie Holmes, I think, at the time. But
you're right.
It's infectious to hear all this excitement from you, though. And the same with Dr. State. We're going to introduce a couple more people into this conversation. Let me just go back to you, Matt State, for just a moment and find out about research and what's going to be up ahead with research in the new building.
Yeah. So I think it's one of the areas that I'm extremely excited about. In my life, I balance between being a researcher. I was and a clinician, and I have intense interest in this for a whole variety of reasons beyond curiosity. And I do have to say that I think one of the most powerful kind of antidotes to stigma is going to be breakthroughs in research that allow us to understand particularly serious mental illness in a way that we've not understood it before, and then particularly to do a better job of treating it. I think we have history with cancer and many other disorders where those kinds of transformations of really beginning to understand at a basic level, and then very importantly being able to intervene in very effective ways, including to provide cures for some of the most severely ill patients, is something that really is the vision for the research, both in this building and in our basic science efforts. So in this building in particular, we're going to bring in some folks soon. One is Dr. Eddie Chang, who's the chair of neurosurgery, who's a remarkable partner with us in a very broad program that brings together neurology, neurosurgery, psychiatry, to think about new ways to understand psychiatric illness, and then to be able to directly influence activity in the brain, sometimes for those who are not severely ill, what's called non-invasively, but to do that in a way that really has the power, we think, to transform not only our understanding of our ability to treat. And then there are a whole range. One of the amazing things about this building, as John said, I could kind of jump up and down in my chair as well, is that the range of things that we have available here is really, we had more than 100 faculty involved in planning this building, and being able to take a blank sheet of paper and say, what should psychiatry and psychiatric clinical research look like 10, 20, 30 years from now to the best of our ability. And really, there isn't anything that we thought of that we don't have an opportunity to have in this building: a sleep lab, a psychedelics research center, a neuroimaging center, neuromodulation with transcranial magnetic stimulation and ultrasound. We've got, a therapeutic kitchen and research facility dedicated to eating disorders, a therapeutic kitchen, therapeutic gym that's dedicated for kids with early developmental challenges. It really is a remarkable opportunity for us, and a platform, I think, to make the kind of breakthroughs we hope that's going to help transform the field.
Getting me jumping up in my seat here. I mean, this is all really very encouraging and very exciting, particularly in light of the fact that, according to recent data, 1 in 5 adults has some mental problem of a serious nature, or a quasi-serious nature, and 1 out of 6 children. I mean, those are staggering numbers. That's why it has to be destigmatized. And I give a great deal of credit to both of you for what you're doing here. And again, congratulations on this well-deserved award. And you mentioned Eddie Chang. I'm going to introduce him and a couple of other people who are going to join us here. Let me, in fact, say, by way of introduction, Ed Chang is Joan and Stanford Weill Chair of the Department of Neurological Surgery, is himself a neurosurgeon. He treats patients with epilepsy, brain tumors, and cranial nerve compression syndromes. He specializes in advanced brain mapping methods to preserve crucial areas for speech and motor functions. And he also has extensive experience with implantable devices that stimulate specific nerves to seizure, movement, pain, and other disorders. And Dr. Chang, welcome to this. Good to have you with us.
Hi, Michael. It's great to be with you guys.
Great to have you. Also joining us, and great to have her with us as well, is Dr. Lisa Fortuna. She's Chief of Psychiatry and Vice Chair at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, UCSF. She's also been an investigator on several National Institutes of Health and foundation-funded studies of Latino and immigrant mental health, integrated care, and access to care. And her areas of expertise are child and adolescent psychiatry, treatment and research on PTSD across the lifespan, immigrant mental health, access to care, and implementation research, including digital interventions. And welcome, Dr. Fortuna.
Thank you, Michael. It's lovely to be here.
Good to have you here. And Lisa Fortuna, let me begin with you. Let's talk about, I mean, you've been in the front lines of this, and the efforts, especially during the pandemic, have been heroic, if I may say so, especially work that you and others have done with San Francisco General Hospital, but also throughout the community. Talk about the challenges, and particularly the challenges in connection with the inequities that you've seen and the significance of, shall we say, more vulnerable populations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Dr. State started to talk a little bit about this. I mean, it's interesting. I arrived in San Francisco from Boston in November 2020, right? And in March, we were kicking up this pandemic, right? And the response. So, I learned by trial by fire, right? In terms of really sort of seeing what we can do. The good news is that I was at least able to learn a lot about our department and the tremendous amount of work that is done here at ZSFG, being the psych emergency service for the city of San Francisco, inpatient services, and then citywide case management, which Dr. State mentioned, which really serves intensive case management, the largest, number of people who are served by citywide who need intensive case management, who are homeless. Right. And one of the things that we immediately really felt during the pandemic was our first question was, how do we take care of our most vulnerable people, right, that we take care of? And that was the homeless, right, and our immigrant populations, and the people and children, right, who were out of school, and we were really concerned about what was happening to them, and we couldn't see them. So we also went from 0 to 100 in terms of telemedicine, telehealth. There was none. We had no capacity to do that before that, and did it in 2 weeks. And we were dependent at first of the generosity of donors who, provided technology for us to do that. And we had to do that in very creative ways, because it wasn't just, well, let's, put up our system. But, our homeless population, you were like, well, they don't have computers, and some of them don't have phones. And we found that it was critical to get those phones out. And even though it was not ideal, because the environment of Citywide, the community that's built around people for severe mental illness and support, those relationships, and that's one of the things I really learned. The relationships that we have with our patients are critical to their well-being. And so we couldn't have them in the space because of the distancing. So we, with the phones, the staff and faculty were able to reach out even to people who were in hotels and on the street. And there were many instances where that actually saved lives, and people were calling when they had an overdose and saying, I need help, or, really, and the constant message that we got was the appreciation that we were still with them. And the same thing with our families who, we're able to get sort of technology to them and continue to see their children and in the multiple languages that we can, which I think is something that is really critical, because, at the General, we serve, multilingual, multicultural population with minimal access to services otherwise. And the relationships and the cultural sensitivity and the care that we give them really overcomes a lot of these issues that we've been talking about in terms of stigma, access, and quality of care. And the pandemic just sealed it for me that this is the place to be that's really serving our community.
I must say I'm impressed with the emphasis you put on relationships. That's so vital and so important and integral to mental health and to establishing movement forward. And I'd like to ask you about that movement forward, because I did so many programs on homelessness and its relationship to not only mental health, but also to addiction. And there really is a nexus there between homelessness and addiction. I'm sure you're all too well aware. I wonder if maybe you could say some things that are, aside from relationships, in the positive realm in terms of moving forward and moving toward diminishing the staggering numbers that I alluded to before.
Yeah. And that's something that an area that we want to, we're continuing to expand on. I mean, Dr. State talked about this idea of integration, right? And the fact that at the new building that there's going to be integration of physical health, medical illness, and psychiatric. And one of the things that we definitely see in the General is we need also the integration of substance use disorders and treatment. And nationally, one of the concerns that's out there is that really a lot of those services are often siloed. And, you go to one place for substance, and then you have to get referred for your mental health somewhere else. And what we know is that really those things intersect, right, all the time. And that if we don't address all of those things, as well as the basic needs of housing and social determinants of health, like economic issues, that it's really hard to overcome any one of those things, right? Separately. It has to be an integrated approach. So, so Citywide is one of our programs, for example, that is really expanding their intensive case management to have this integrated approach, right, to mental health, substance, and housing support and social support. And as we're working with the city, which is also working towards getting more housing, right, for the homeless population, we're working on how do we integrate our services into, new scattered housing sites. And as people are housed, how do we help them maintain their housing and maintain their mental health and substance use disorder treatment, even as they're getting housed? And so we see that we have to look at all of those things together. And so the exciting things we are working with, the city, especially with the mental health SF transformation of really thinking about how we can integrate that. And with the new director of mental health, Hillary Kunins, Dr. Kunins, who's an addiction medicine doctor herself, and really thinking about how do we bring all of those issues together, because it really has to have a multi-pronged approach.
You sound positive. You sound optimistic.
I try to be. You have to be in this work.
Yeah, well, it's inspiring to hear that kind of optimism. Let me bring Dr. Cheng, Eddie Cheng. You've done some extraordinary work on brain machines and interfacing and all that sort of thing. How's the brain work going to really revolutionize mental health as you see it? I mean, understanding not only diagnostically, but in terms of treatment of brain disorders and mental health generally.
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited about this. And there's this, I think it's a really interesting time, because a while back, probably interaction between psychiatry department and nursery really just didn't exist. So we'll get back to that in a second. But, why I think that this could be really potentially revolutionizing is just because we just need to understand with much better resolution how the human brain works. And, I think there's a potential paradigm shift ahead of us, essentially shifting away from the idea that, the brain is a bag of chemicals and towards something that's, thinking about it as an organ with really exquisite, precisely operating brain circuits that really use precise electrical impulses to communicate. And the concept with this is just trying to be able to understand how that works normally and then how it goes awry in neuropsychiatric conditions. And then what can we do to actually modulate in a very precise way how those circuits work. And so our goal is to really make therapies more precise, more effective, and then also with less side effects. So for example, one of the areas that we're really thinking hard about is in depression, where electroconvulsive therapy, shock therapy is used, and it's quite effective actually for treatment of really severe refractory depression. But is also really kind of crude in terms of how it can really affect the entire brain, and is oftentimes associated with side effects like memory loss. And so,
Dr. Cheng also got kind of a bad name back in the day because of people like Sylvia Plath and writers like Ken Kesey and so forth. We had to overcome that as obstacles, I'm sure.
Absolutely. But the reality is it's a really important mainstay of our care for patients who are really sick and refractory. And so the goal is to just be a lot more precise and think about the brain, not that dissimilar from the heart, where there's been a lot of progress and innovation around cardiac pacemakers. A lot of the devices that have been designed for the brain for things like Parkinson's and epilepsy, they work pretty well, but in reality, they were based on our knowledge of cardiac pacemakers 30 years ago. And so our hope is to really modernize that with new knowledge about how those brain circuits work and how to really, really precisely and delicately work with those circuits. And, in the short term, it may involve implantable pacemakers, but I think that really for this to change the field, we have to use that knowledge to think about how to use it to generate non-invasive therapies. But all of this has to be grounded in the basic biology and knowledge about how these circuits work.
It's an exciting new field, though, in so many ways. Not entirely new, but keep emphasizing these two organs, the heart and the brain. What do you see as the obstacles, though, to the research up ahead in your field? I mean, in this new field we're talking about, which most people regard as new, but like I say, has a history.
Well, to be honest, I'm really optimistic about it. And the biggest obstacles are really cultural ones, like the interactions. Historically, we just haven't had a lot of interactions with psychiatrists, and we're having those meaningful discussions now in a way that we didn't before. And the biggest obstacle to this is that this is a new form of medicine that we're talking about. It involves analyzing brainwaves, essentially, from precise parts of the brain. And that it requires engineering, signal processing, machine learning. That's all being brought to bear on this problem. I'm optimistic because those things are all there. The obstacles are to create a community, an environment that allows us to operate across these different kinds of fields of training. And I think that that's really something that's special about what John and Matt have done, is create a building where some of that really innovative work is going to take place from really all different disciplines to make that happen.
UCSF has always had a history of interdisciplinary work and aiming high and doing remarkably innovative things. And it really is exciting to hear all this. And let me congratulate you personally, because I know you recently named as chair of UCSF's Department of Neurological Surgery. And I'd like to find out maybe what excites you the most and what your priorities are.
Well, I mean, this excites me the most. I mean, this is really what gets me going. I mean, I love operating. I love being in the operating room and taking care of patients in that really intimate way. The operating microscope has allowed us to do surgeries, on microscopic blood vessels and beyond. But I have to say, admittedly, we're kind of like at the end of that era of technical supremacy. I really do think we're almost at the limits of what we can do with our hands, but we're not at the limits of what we can do with our mind and our creativity around other indications, the work that we're doing in neuropsychiatry. So I really see that is part of our future in neurosurgery. It's these collaborations with our colleagues to really think about some really, really difficult questions. Essentially, how does the brain work fundamentally? And then how do we get it back on track when things go awry? And so that is what really gets me excited. And I think that really is going to be the future of neurosurgery.
You're reminding me of an interview I did years ago with Francis Crick of Watson and Crick, who said it's all about neurons, right? that's kind of what we're looking at here. And I wish you great success with this exciting field you're in. Let me go back to Dr. Fortuna. I'm looking at some questions that are coming in from the audience. And if I may, Lisa Fortuna, this is a question I think almost tailor-made for you. Someone sent this in and says, which particular groups of people do you anticipate being most impacted by the pandemic in the long term regarding their mental health, and how do you prepare to treat them?
Yeah, I mean, there's several populations that we're worried about, right, that we want to make sure to take care of. One is children. That's one of the groups that we're really wanting to prepare for, because especially kids who already may have had some pre-existing problems like depression or anxiety or trauma or developmental disabilities, who have been out of school, right, and out of the services of the things that are usually supportive for them, not around the people who are usually watching and taking care of them and making sure that they're, meeting their milestones in terms of educational, benchmarks and that. So so we feel like we're a little bit concerned that they may have really potentially regressed in some of those things, right, and needing extra help. So, one of the things we're doing is working with our pediatrician colleagues in really optimizing how we can screen and also with our school system, and how we can screen and really sort of build a more seamless way of having referrals and levels of care that we can provide collaboratively. It's another one of those situations where I think we have to become less siloed in really working across, psychiatry, primary care, school systems, community-based organizations. And there's more and more happening in that realm. And then the other groups that we're worried about are people who are most economically devastated, right? Or either people who are homeless and already without resources and have seen increases in their mental health symptoms as well as substance use. We've seen more overdoses during the pandemic, because of people's not being linked to their services. So that's another group that we want to make sure we bring back into the fold and really support and figure out innovations to do that. How can we sort of do more connecting, right? And sometimes using technology, right? We got kind of interested in this phone thing, right? And using technology with populations that we're like, well, we don't, normally use technology with those populations. They can't keep phones or they don't have the technology. And, we're actually working now on, some innovation around using technology to better assess and screen and motivate people around their substance use treatment, and to monitor them and stay in closer contact with the kids. We're also looking at some ways to improve our screening and triage. And with this idea, if we have a sort of technology supported navigators, right, who have cultural competence and connections with the community and can use technology to stay connected and help that navigation process. So we're trying to create that technology innovation to be able to really bridge some of the needs that we know are going to be increasing, and especially as children even go back to school.
And I can't help ask you about all those who, as you alluded to, have no access to technology, especially in the homeless population.
Right. I mean, some did, right, but many didn't. So we really had to sort of get those things out. And then now we're actually looking at how to improve their use of the phones, retention of the phones, and that we can actually use them for interventions, right? I mean, and more hybrid, right? Because we want to bring them back into in-person and those connections, but this will be an extension of services. And we're also thinking about whether we can have some increase in the precision of our interventions. If we can use tools to better assess and follow, how people do with those different interventions using technology, we can potentially get better and better at identifying, using our screening measures more appropriately, and then actually better targeting the interventions. And that's what we're hoping we'll be able to do.
Share your hopes. Let me go back to you, Matt State, if I may, Dr. State, with an audience question. What advice do you have for all of us to improve our mental health as we endeavor to emerge from the confinement of the past year?
That's a big question. Well, it's going to sound like a commercial message. One of the things that you can do is go take a look at our website at the Department of Psychiatry. Actually, we have folks, one of the great things in being in this department, and one of the things that brought me out here was just the extraordinary array of people that we have. And we have a whole group of folks who spend an enormous amount of time thinking about resilience and wellness, and how to help promote, positive brain health early in development all the way through the lifespan. And this quite literally a lot of resources. Our website is not the greatest in the world, but it is, I think, incredibly useful. Our vice chair for psychology, Alyssa Eppel, has put together an extraordinary array of videos, curated materials, including apps, links to helpful information that goes all the way from just providing some helpful tips, whether it's parenting a child now through the transition back to school, or needing clinical services. So
I have to hear that I'm an admirer of Alyssa. She was on the radio with me a number of times.
Just a remarkable person. Yeah. So that's a way to access that. And I think, it's a really important question. I think one of the things I would add that Dr. Fortuna didn't mention is that she was also very early in trying to think about the mental health challenges for people who were affected by COVID. And so started a service very early that integrated psychiatric care in the pulmonary clinics and the follow-up clinics for COVID. And I think that's another area. It's going to be, a unique population. I think, fortunately, in San Francisco, that population isn't quite as large as it is in some of the other cities in the United States. But I think that's going to be a really significant challenge, is understanding the direct impact COVID, the infection, and then post-infectious challenges around mental health, because at least the early evidence suggests that that's going to be a really significant number right now. About, in surveys of 30% or more of folks who suffered from the infection are now presenting with significant psychiatric symptomatology.
A few more audience questions. Let me go back to you, Dr. Chang. I think this is in your bailiwick. One of the listeners, viewers wants to know, are there any new ways of looking and treating autism on the horizon? I'm thinking of that because of brain work.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question. And it's one of these areas that we're actually thinking about quite seriously with Matt and his group. I think we got to start with the science and the biology. There's been a lot of empirical work with new treatments, but ultimately we're trying to really understand how to take the knowledge that we have about the genetics of autism, which Matt has really been a pioneer in discovering the underlying, genetic substrates and mechanisms around autism, and to really understanding what does that look like in terms of brain function in an adolescent and adult brain. That's where things are really unclear right now. Like what is the effect of those mutations on brain function? And if we can figure that out, we can figure out ways to intervene with that processing in a way that we haven't had before, both medical or with ways of induced stimulation and whatnot. I'm really optimistic because through the work that's being done in animal models now, but also some of the work that we've done with people, volunteers, with autism that have come through our clinical center, which have donated tissue, et cetera. I think we're getting closer. I'm not saying that we're there by any means, but I think we're getting closer to the right kind of questions. And we've had a terrific foundation with the genetics to start that. But those are the next steps.
Thank you for that. And there's one last question here from an audience, and I'm going to go to you, John Pritzker. One of the viewers wants to know, will you be researching non-traditional mental health treatments, for example, gut-brain connections? Is that part of the vision? We've heard before about psychedelics and all kinds of other things that may be part of the whole gestalt here.
Michael, are you really asking me a question about psychedelics? I leave that to Matt, Lisa, and
I'm actually just asking about non-traditional kind of research.
Yeah, okay, I'll go with that. I think that Barbara and Barney Osher funded the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, and I think that they've shown how effective alternative treatments can be. And I think that's also in Matt, Eddie, and Lisa's bailiwick. And so I would look forward to those studies. I do want to say two things if I could take the opportunity, Michael. One is I'm sitting here listening to Matt and Lisa and Eddie, and philanthropy is only a different function of investment. And when you invest, the first thing you vet is the management. And I'm sitting here with a grin on my face because as I listen to them, these are the best and the brightest. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have the opportunity to support them. We all do what we can and play our part. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be associated with them. The other thing is I have to give a shout out to my mom. Stigma affects everybody, and my mom's kind of old school. And all along the way, I asked her if it was okay if I talked about Nancy this way. And she said, I wish you would. And she may be listening tonight. And so I give her big props for being so supportive.
Well, props to your mother, indeed. And I can't help asking you about how you feel personally about the kind of advancements we've made since the 70s when this was so verboten and you were talking about, you couldn't even talk about it, right?
It's apples and hammers. I was a kid when Nancy had her episode, but I could see the frustration in my parents. There was just not much available. And I went and talked to her doctor after we lost her. And Matt, you can clarify this, but really the only thing that was available at the time was lithium. And it was a pretty selective application. Now, I'm sitting here listening to Eddie talk about what he can do. on the executive council, we have a speaker every meeting. And Eddie came and spoke and talked about what he was working on. And I literally was bouncing in my chair. And so, I couldn't be more thrilled about what's happening. And when September, October rolls around, to see this thing crank up its engine and get underway, I think we're going to see world-class things come out of there. And I think this isn't just about the community, although community is critical. I think this will have global impact, the work that they're doing.
Well, it's a wonderful way to honor your sister's memory, and congratulations again on
Thank you.
the award you're getting this evening. And Matt, you want to say some final things about the building and what's up ahead?
Tough to follow that. I just have to say this has been it's been an extraordinary opportunity, and I think just listening to John, if it weren't for John and Lisa and their vision, and they hung in there really through thick and thin. They gave you a short version of this story, but when people were not focused on mental health, and it was really a struggle to hang in and to make this a priority. They transformed the landscape, and I think the opening of the building in some ways is going to be the end of an initial arc. But as John just said, I think when this opens, honestly, I feel the same way. I look at Dr. Chang and Dr. Fortuna and just think, geez, I open the building, get the hell out of the way, and these people are going to transform what it means to be a patient, what it means to be a family member, and all I can do is say we're going to work hard every day to try to fulfill the vision that the Pritzkers laid out for us about the importance of mental health and changing the narrative. So I think that's it. That's what I got to say.
Well, some great strides up ahead. I can envision that. And we made such advances, as I said, just from the 70s. We can maybe move at that same trajectory, or hope at least to move in that same fashion with that kind of quantum advancement. I wonder, in fact, I hope those who are with us this evening can work toward, on an individual level, destigmatizing and thinking about just how important it is to destigmatize mental health. It's vitally important. And people have to be aware of it and conscious of it. And certainly those who suffer, and particularly the families that suffer and friends that suffer, know it all too well. But my hat goes off to all of you. And again, I congratulate the two recipients. Matt State, congratulations to you. John Pritzker, congratulations to you. An award well earned and well deserved. And so good to have Edward Chang and Lisa Fortuna with us. And certainly our hats off and thanks to the Commonwealth Club for all they've done here this evening. I'm not sure who I turn it over to here, because I'm looking in the chat room and nobody's giving me any indication. So I'm going to have to be a little awkward with this conclusion.
I give it back to Matt. Let him keep going.
No.
My instinct is to say to Gloria Duffy or George Dobbins, come on and join us. But I just really want to thank everybody, and particularly thank you two for getting this really extraordinary thing in motion. You've got the people, you've got certainly the drive, you've got the funding, you've got really everything that makes this an exciting and extraordinary project. Full steam ahead. I wish you the best. And thank you so much.
Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gratitude is really what I'm saying to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.